Hey, it's great to see you again. Welcome back to this next episode of With Purpose. Today, we are going to be talking about seasons. And I've got a couple examples of what seasons might look like in your life, in our lives together as a community, or for you personally. But before we get there, I just want to say this. Being a leader, being a person that people look to, sometimes is a tough spot to be. It feels like we need to be perfect, and we are not ever going to be perfect. And I want you to recognize that and give yourself permission to learn and grow and change through this process. That's a big part of actually what seasons are all about. Recognizing where we're at in our own growth process, or where our companies are at in their growth process, and applying the right skills, the right ideas, the right things at the right time. So with that in mind, let's dive in. All right. So seasons. Most of those of us that are a little bit older are familiar with the song from the Byrds, Turn, Turn, Turn. For every season in life, there is something. Today, I want to talk about two different pictures of what seasons look like, either in our world or in our organization, and what that means for us as leaders. The first one that I want to dig into a little bit is a theory from a guy named Neil Howe that wrote a book called The Fourth Turning. So some of you might be familiar with this book. Neil is a historian, and he studies the cycles that happen in civilizations through our past. So going way back, hundreds of years back, in civilizations all over the world. So going back through history, Neil and his team have actually identified a cycle that most civilizations go through, and they've matched this cycle up with the seasons that we're all familiar with. So it looks like this in his theory. There's spring, and spring is a time of strong institutions. Society is focused on building, stability, conformity. This is when things feel really great. So that's spring. After spring, we know, comes summer. And in summer is where people start to question some established norms. So I think we've all seen examples of that. It's often marked by social movements, and then towards the end of that season, towards the end of summer, we start to see a little bit of cultural upheaval. Next up comes fall, of course, and this is where institutions become weaker, trust starts eroding, individualism is celebrated instead of community, and society ultimately becomes more fragmented, and we're all more cynical. This is the cycle that we've been in our country for the last few years. So fall is what that feels like. And then next comes winter, or what they call the crisis, where typically some large event happens and the scales tip over from some of this rising cynicism or fragmentation into just upheaval. This is when we see times of war, revolution, or like large scale societal restructuring. So when big things are changed. But then it's out of this winter that we see a rising leader that comes and is able to bring people back together, and we start the cycle again. So we go back into spring and we see a time of building, and you can see how this cycle repeats. And if you were to look at the book, The Fourth Turning, you can see examples that he gives from our own history here in America or other civilizations around the world. And it's pretty compelling, actually. I would encourage you to check that out. Not exactly a uplifting book, because we're in winter or about to enter winter in our country right now, if Neil is right. So some tough times ahead, or tough years that we're in right now. But interesting to think about in terms of what does a cycle look like, or what do seasons look like in terms of a community or a country. The next example of seasons that I want to talk about is one from my friend named Ryan Bond. So Ryan has a podcast called The Pre-Shift that we're going to link to here in the show notes. Ryan is the people leader at an organization that runs restaurants all over the country. He is trained in organizational behavior and is a great thinker. And we would encourage you to check out his podcast. So Ryan did a series on his podcast a few weeks ago that I've actually been thinking a lot about, where he walked through the different seasons of growth that we go through. He used an analogy of farming, planting, gardening, and applied it to what does it look like as a leader in a workplace. So Ryan does a great job of laying out what leadership looks like at each of the different phases that you would think about along the way. And so it starts with preparing the soil and thinking about how do we prepare our own abilities? How do we prepare our organizations for what's next in growth? How do we plant seeds? That's the second one he walks through. And really planting seeds is about seeing potential in people. Tending takes place after that. And so sometimes we have to prune or tend the gardens that we plant. And that can be a tough process to go through, but ultimately we are pruning things so that what we are growing grows up to meet its full potential or the best of its ability. And then finally, we get to harvest. And harvest is about reaping the rewards of all of the investments that we have made. And then he talks about a final step that sometimes I think we forget about in the business world, and that is rest, or this idea that renewal and renewal of the soil, rest for us as people is an important part of this cycle, because if we are constantly working or doing these other things, we aren't going to be able to give our best. And so he puts rest and renewal into this cycle as an important step, and I totally agree with him there. So that's another look at what seasons look like. So tying this all together, whether you think about your leadership from a perspective of a gardening analogy, or you think about what's happening in the community where you live or the country that you live in from a cyclical patterns of history perspective, certainly you can see that what leadership needs to be, what your engagement needs to be in these different seasons is different. Leading in spring is certainly different than leading at a time of winter when things are really hard. Tending a garden, leading a brand new team member that we're trying to grow is certainly different than leading a team that's mature and it's time to let them excel and really the organization can harvest the benefits of their capabilities. These are all different times. Okay, so with that in mind, I think now is a good time to transition into thinking about what this idea or concept of seasons would mean for you in your role at your company or in your organization or even your role in your family. Before we get there, I want to make sure that you know we've created a planner that goes along with this episode. We do this for every episode here at With Purpose, and you can download that either from the show notes or from the website. We'll link to both down below. And on this planner, we have created some specific places for you to think through these specific questions. But before we get there, we're going to start with gratitude. Recognizing the good things that have happened in the last week is important. So often, as leaders, we get focused on all of the bad stuff that happened or all of the things that we need to do next, and we need to take just a minute and celebrate all of the good that has gone on. For each of these questions, we'll give you about 30 seconds. If you need more time, that's fine. Just pause this podcast. Next up, I also want you to make a list of some of the things that you keep thinking about and maybe you're dreading that you just need to get done. You know, for me, this looks like an insurance renewal. It just drains the life out of me. Okay, so first question today, and I want to think about this first question from the perspective of Ryan Bond's concept of gardening and leadership and the overlap there. And my question is, what season do you think you are in? Is it a time for planting, for tending, for harvest, or rest? And second question, and this one you can think about from that same perspective of Ryan Bond's concept or from the broader societal perspective that Neil Howe has for seasons. And the question is this: is your leadership in line with the season that you're in? Or do you need to make a couple changes? For example, if your organization is in a time of spring, it's hungry for vision and bold ideas. But if your organization is in a time of winter, those bold ideas are going to land on deaf ears because what they need, what your organization needs, is stability. All right, so there is a whole lot to dig into in the two concepts that I've shared with you. The Fourth Turning, amazing book, a little bit of a long read, but I think you'll find it appropriate for our times today if you take the time to dig in. And Ryan's podcasts on gardening and their overlap with leadership and what those mean to us really are so impactful. I would encourage you to spend a little bit of time this next week checking one of those out. So that's it for this episode of With Purpose. I am excited to share each week a little bit of what I've been thinking about or learning with you, as well as help you apply it to your planning for the week ahead. I know that you, me, all of us, we have more to do than we have time to do it in. And so it's really important that what we choose to work on, we choose carefully and we do it all with a little bit of purpose. So that's the hope for this podcast. If we're doing a good job, I hope you'll subscribe. I hope you'll share it with your friends. If we're not doing a good job, I hope you'll tell me that. Send us a little bit of feedback. Otherwise, I will see you in another week for the next episode of With Purpose.